You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello everybody and welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. This week I'm joined by Alttaf Hussain and Valentina Dotto. Alttaf is the Director of Engineering at Yoti, and we're going to talk a little bit today about digital signatures and identity. And Valentina is the Policy and Trust Framework Researcher, and we'll have some input on some of the thinking that goes into the work that Yoti do. I'm going to start by drilling a little bit into the different kinds of digital signatures that exist, because there are a number of different ones. In the course of the conversation ahead of this podcast, Alttaf, we've been chatting about the different types of signatures that exist. They all do slightly different things. They all mean slightly different things. And of course, from a compliance point of view, some are more compliant, in inverted commas, than others. So perhaps to start with, a wander through the terminology would be really useful to frame the discussion.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks for having us on and just getting straight into things around the different types of electronic signatures out there. And I say electronic because digital signatures have a different connotation. They can sometimes mean a cryptographic signature, which is something that we use but is totally different to like electronic signatures and signing a document, if you will.
And therein is my first mistake. I've called it a digital signature, you've called it an electronic signature, so definitely worth clearing these things up.
So simple electronic signatures, SES, are, as the name suggests, basic sort of electronic signatures. Some people call them that too. It's like the acceptance of your terms and conditions. So everyone's had to scroll through that long text and then say I agree or I accept. That in itself is a simple electronic signature. That's recording consent from a user to do a particular action or agreeance to some terms. Those manifest themselves as like a little mark, a checkbox, tick box, and things like that. So that's simple electronic signatures. The next one in the list is advanced electronic signatures, and these have a level of identity associated with them. They are uniquely linked to the signatory, they are tamper evident, and with a good level of assurance, ensure that the user can use it in their sole control. Just to add, basic electronic signatures should be tamper evident, but they have no identity. So the key difference here is identity. And they are typically issued through cryptographic means where you have a certificate associated with an identity. So that's an advanced electronic signature. You can get very deep into the technical elements of it, but the compliance use case is that you have an identity linked to a signature, so you get a higher level of assurance. So if someone's buying your car, buying your house, you kind of need to know who they are, just because you need to know where to wire the money, and so it doesn't end up in some foreign sort of bank account, Swiss bank account somewhere. So that's the advanced electronic signatures. Now, the final one, it's the qualified electronic signatures, and those are similar to advanced electronic signatures, meaning that they have an identity attached to them, they're used under the sole control of the user, and they are tamper evident, but they meet another standard, which is to be qualified. And I just wanted to touch a little bit about that, because we're going to be talking, I suppose, around qualified signatures quite a lot. Qualified signatures, electronic signatures, are technically the same as advanced electronic signatures, with the added element of it being issued by a qualified trust service provider. And these terms, we can go through what they mean in detail, but for the purposes of qualified electronic signatures and this conversation, I'm just going to limit it to the things that you need to create a qualified electronic signature. So we talked about advanced electronic signatures. They've got a strong identity associated with them, but then who issued that identity? Where did it come from? And that's where the trust service provider comes in. A trust service provider, someone that an entity that's been audited to issue certificates based on an identity, and that they are on a trust list, a trust framework. So you need a specific set of qualified technology that you use to create these signatures, and that's the difference. So qualified electronic signatures are issued by a trusted third party. If you think about it like that, that's, in simple terms, that's what it means. So same as advanced electronic signatures, but with the qualified trusted third party element.
I'm going to ask a follow-up to that that's come to mind. The delivery of the request for signatures is still very largely done by email, which, as we all know, is very insecure. How do the digital signatures or the electronic signatures cope with that insecurity of delivery?
The insecurity of delivery over email is something that's been around for a long time. One of the largest e-signature providers had a phishing attack, which was pretty brutal. Lots of users received e-signing requests that looked like they came from this e-signature provider, and they signed these documents, but they were for a malign purpose. So email as a medium of delivering e-sign requests is and has been since for the last 10 or 15 years the medium of delivering e-sign requests. Now we're noticing new things coming onto the market, SMS, push notifications, but the security isn't in the medium, it's in the authentication. So I could send you something, but if you can't authenticate, it doesn't matter. I get spam mail, I get loads of requests to transfer hundreds of pounds into my account all the time. It's the next stage of you clicking on the link and authenticating that protects you, or in some cases doesn't protect you.
We've seen a significant amount of progress being made by the working group on e-signatures around adoption. In fact, we've done a podcast about it on this program, in which we hear that from a compliance point of view, the use of e-signatures is very much encouraged. How can tech providers give greater reassurance to the conveyancing community that this is a compliant solution?
This has been satisfied by the Safe Harbor standard, which is the draft set of requirements by the HM Land Registry, which encourages digital identity checks in the conveyancing process, and provides safe harbor to those law firms who use a digital ID provider that meets the Safe Harbor standard. So what does it mean in practice? It sort of provides a peace of mind that if reasonable steps have been taken to validate the identity of an individual, then they gain safe harbor standards. So if they have gained sufficient evidence from the client, if they have checked the validity of the documents provided, and if they make sure that the evidence provided matches the biometric profile of the client, then they have satisfied all the standards to verify the individual as set out by the digital ID standard.
So from a product perspective, if you wind back a couple of years, COVID hit, and there was a massive need to move into the digital space when it came to conveyancing, simply because people were not allowed to meet. Wet signatures were not allowed to be done in person because of the government restrictions. So the industry had to adapt. We had been working with the HM Land Registry on a practice guidance, a set of practice guidance, so PG8 and PG82. So in this practice guidance, effectively, we talked about conveyancer certified electronic signatures. These are e-witnessing in sort of layman's terms, being able to witness something, but in digital space. And we worked with the land registry to develop a set of rules that govern the creation of a signing ceremony where witness is present through by keeping everyone authenticated and safe. This was quite tricky because we at Yoti, we have our own ID product, so we come at e-signatures through an identity lens, whereas the HMLR, we're looking at this to make it as easy and as quick and safe for conveyancers across the industry. So there was some feedback that we gave them, and you've effectively end up with a series of steps. So and a lot of it involves emails and SMS. So authenticating via SMS, sending a one-time passcode to everyone involved in the signing ceremony. So if you're signing a deed, a transfer of a house, you'd have to go through a series of steps, sending out a document to a buyer, and the buyer would sign the document by first authenticating themselves with SMS and then going through an e-sign process. They would then assign a witness who would then have to go through SMS authentication and then sign the document. And all of that is done to a prescribed set of rules that has been laid out in the practice guidance. So in a nutshell, the way that users, both witnesses, conveyancers, and buyers are protected is through a series of checks that are done, and through the practice guidance where SMS and email are involved in the signing ceremony.
Talk to me about the security side of e-witnessing, because this is a critical part of the challenge. Security in the e-witnessing space is very, very important because, like signing documents, viewing documents, the industry as a whole in terms of e-witnessing has taken the stance of ease of use over security. That's slowly starting to change because of the nature of how people are using e-signatures and how people are transacting online. Solutions in the industry today are starting to get more privacy focused and more security focused. So, for example, you can ask for identity profiles before you see the document. So you have to kind of do some ID checks before you see the document. You can do some ID checks at the time of signing, AML, PEPs and sanctions. You can really start to use the platforms that are available today, the identity platforms that are available today, to create a more secure signing process, which is more fitting for 2022. We've dragged our heels a bit as an industry, but I think with the introduction of GPG 45 and some of the trust frameworks that are being introduced in the UK and the world, people are starting to recognise that you need to have strong authentication when you're signing a document of any importance.
Alttaf, you've talked about Brexit at the start of this conversation. You've just identified that different jurisdictions will require different levels of trust framework. Mm-hmm. Valentina, what impact has that had on the way that you've developed what you do, and what impact has Brexit had on your development?
So Brexit has complicated things, mostly because there hasn't been any prior agreements during the negotiation exit process. And therefore, a lot of the legislation that was introduced into the UK to sort of comply with EU legislation was retained, along with national legislation. So what we have at the moment is an overlapping of different types of legislation. So we have at the moment EIDAS and we have GPG 45. EIDAS is a European legislation that seeks to enhance trust in electronic transaction in internal markets and provides a common foundation for secure electronic interaction between citizens, businesses, and public authorities. And GPG 45 satisfies similar requirements, and it's, in layman's term, is a standard that explains how the government expects identity verification to be performed. So what we have been seeing recently is that in further legislation, for instance, in UK trust frameworks, they require GPG 45 as a qualifier for qualified e-signatures, whereas EIDAS will follow a different type of requirements. The issue is also that EIDAS legislation will be upgraded in 2023 with the EIDAS 2.0, and the same will not happen in the UK because, of course, the UK is not part of the European Union anymore.
Brexit, when it did happen, there was like a copy-paste effect of legislation. It took EIDAS and it basically rebranded it as BEIDAS, British EIDAS. The ICO, we've spoken to them around, well, we've got other trust frameworks, as Valentina mentioned, GPG 45. How do those work, and are they compatible with BEIDAS? And the answer was, we're not sure. There is some work that's going on that Valentina mentioned around, like, moving towards GPG 45, but that's something that we've spoken to the land registry about. And the way that we have been working with them is, when we're building these products, we talk to the HMLR and say, the feedback is, if we were to go down the EIDAS route, it's very expensive, and there's no legislative need to do that right now. So you're asking us to spend a lot of money and on something that you would like us to do. Whereas with GPG 45 and the identity trust frameworks that are being set out in that sort of directive, there are real use cases: right to work, right to rent, and DBS checks. So why can't we unify the GPG 45 across industry sectors? So you've got the right land registry, but you've also got another government department, DCMS, doing two different things. And we're highlighting the fact that, as an identity provider, we are doing, the DCMS stuff. Why can't we use it across the board? And that feedback has been received pretty well. EIDAS is not really compatible with GPG 45 in that, from a straight swap kind of perspective, but they do, in essence, the same things. They do the trust frameworks, create an identity profile that can then be used in digital transactions.
So what does the product roadmap look like? How do you, technology, stay a step ahead of the criminal?
Well, in order to combat the criminal, you have to think like a criminal. Criminal activity.
That's the risk, isn't it? That's where you get yourself into trouble.
Yeah. A lot of, I suppose, e-sign providers do not come at things from an identity perspective. So, like, as you mentioned earlier, the whole email thing, phishing, insecure documents being leaked. That's something that, are now first class problems. Things that we need to be aware of. hackers are starting to cotton onto the fact that there's a lot of these archaic processes that are open to abuse. So they'll be probing and looking around things like man-in-the-middle attacks, things like phishing, things like cracking. So we get regular probes on our infrastructure daily coming from various unbeknown territories, so to say. That they're probing our infrastructure. They're trying to sort of get in any way they can. And if it's happening to us, it's definitely happening to government. It's definitely happening to larger enterprise firms. So we really need to wake up to the fact that this is here now. And I was listening to a podcast on the internet, and the internet was never designed to be a battleground. That's what it is. Cyber security, cyber warfare is a real thing, and it's like 24 hours a day coming from multiple attack vectors. So my advice to conveyancers or anyone in a position of compliance is use technology, look at the solutions out there, and go with a security first approach. And that's how we build things in terms of Yoti. And that's why the product roadmap is now focusing a lot more towards identity verification in our eSign product. So we have a few different products, but eSign and identity are kind of like interlinked. If you can authenticate someone, you can mitigate a lot of the attacks. So it's about knowing who you're transacting with online, which has been a very historical, difficult problem to solve.
I think one of the problems that we see from a practitioner's point of view is that there are times when regulation is actually holding back innovation. It's holding back the opportunity to use this technology. What would you like to see from the regulators that might encourage the wider adoption of digital signatures?
After working with the HMLR and talking through just the regulations as they stand, we'd like to see things like GPG 45 becoming a standard. So in the UK, we have loads of government departments that sometimes talk different languages. So one framework, and Valentina helped me out here, keep me honest, one framework would apply, like GPG 45 will apply for DCMS, and then the HMLR are looking at EIDAS or BIDAS for QES, Qualified Electronic Signatures. So you've got kind of like conflicting identity profiles in the same space. So I'd like to see just some uniform sort of approaches. And what do you think, Valentina?
So if I have to think about it, I would say probably will be interesting to look also what other countries have done in the area. So if you think about the European Union, it will introduce two pieces of legislation which will really help in this regard. One is the Digital Governance Act, and the other one is the Cybersecurity Act. The first one, the Digital Governance Act, will so basically it's based on the premises that data is an untapped asset that must be unlocked to enable a stronger European digital economy. And so what it does is two things: data portability and interoperability. And the new rules really aim to build trust in data sharing, making it safer and easier, as well as ensuring that it's in line with current data protection legislation. And this will be achieved through a range of tools that varies from technical solutions, such as like anonymization, to pooling of data, to legally binding agreements by the reusers. And then the EU Cybersecurity Act, which is already in force. It entered in force in June 2019 and introduced two key things. One is a EU-wide certification scheme and a stronger mandate for the EU Agency on Cybersecurity. And this way, it achieved three things. It built trust for the users. It increased the cybersecurity market's growth, and it also eased trade across the EU. It really solved what we are seeing in the UK, which is market fragmentation and regulatory barriers.
Yeah. I'd say that from the conveyancing perspective, after doing product research, it does seem like moving outside of the standard processes that are sort of already set up, it's a bit of a burden, and anything we can do to reduce the friction. It shouldn't be this hard in 2022 to complete a house purchase. It shouldn't be multiple trips to the office, an archaic Mercury process slowing things down. It should be quick, easy, and effective and safe. And that's where I think we're lacking as a nation a bit in terms of the adoption of technology. I mean, we've researched the European Union, our European counterparts, and their kind of processes are a lot slicker than ours. Blockchain technology also, it does sort of come into land registry sort of use cases, but I think just getting the basics right to begin with, just making it easy, making it public that these things are safe. They're designed for conveyancers. You can use them. You can go and use e-witnessing or conveyance certified electronic signatures solutions, and they solve your problem and do it quickly. And they get the same job done in half the time and safer. Then people will start to move in the right direction. So the first sort of thing I think we need to see is the adoption and the encouragement of digital first transactions, and not paper-based sort of transactions.
I think that's probably sort of heading towards wrapping up. Certainly, I think a lot of conveyancers would be on board with wider adoption of technology and the opportunity that it presents, with the caveat that this is still a very people-focused and people-orientated business. People moving home, for many, it's the most expensive thing they'll ever buy. It's an incredibly emotional purchase, and there's a huge amount that goes into the conveyance that actually is emotional support as much as it is practical and legal support. But technology is a massive enabler. Harnessed in the right way, presents a fantastic opportunity for firms. Alttaf and Valentina, it's been fantastic to sort of chat through some of the differences in the digital signature spectrum. I've done it again, electronic signature spectrum, and also understand a bit more about the direction of travel as well, and perhaps what's holding us back and what the opportunities are in the future. Thank you so much indeed to the both of you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on today's conveyancer.co.uk. Thank you very much indeed for listening, and we'll be back again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.